where um, there wasn't a single, say, millennial on the board, and now a majority of the board are millennials. A year ago, we had a lot of people who had served in office or in elected officials or in city staff before, and now we have fresh blood from the mayor down to supervisors, where a significant percentage of them had not served in elected office or political office before. They brought a wealth of different experience to City Hall, and as a result, have been able to pass landmark legislation on progress on public safety, such as the fentanyl state of emergency, to other housing legislation, to small business streamlining components, things that would not have been possible in previous years with a different board or a different mayor. And the data shows that to effect as well as in cities and counties that have passed term limits, they've led to a double-digit increase in representation as well. And I think lastly, in the context of charter reform, which is a topical conversation this year, this legislation, I think, provides tailwinds into the longer conversation in November. This measure polls at 60%, and even after positives and negatives, and then passing it in June will help us provide tailwinds into a broader conversation around charter reform that it is a popular thing that voters are looking for, and it's something that can take that tailwinds into November when we have other conversations about charter reform as well. And on that component, I think we generally feel that San Francisco tends to lead the way in terms of policy, and that's why we're taking this topic on June while it's salient. Counties up and down the state have started to move towards lifetime term limits. Kern County, Shasta County, just in the last 1 to 2 years, have also moved to lifetime term limits for their county supervisors. So we feel it's time for San Francisco to now lead the way in providing that model for the rest of the state and the rest of the nation. And that's kind of the component of why now and what this does. And it's relatively straightforward, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Supervisor Mahmood. To start, I think the number one question here thus far is why now?
Yeah,
Why?
I mean, I think a couple of things of why now. I kind of touched upon it on the what I mentioned previously. But one, there's momentum building up and down the state on the concept of lifetime term limits. Like I mentioned, Shasta County, Kern County just passed lifetime term limits in the last 1 or 2 years. And so we feel momentum is building. And in those times that a zeitgeist of momentum builds, we feel San Francisco has an opportunity to lead the way to ensure that we are presenting this as a model for the rest of the state and the country. Second, we feel that within the context of the fiscal budget deficit that we're in right now, that it's important that we incentivize our county representatives, our supervisors and mayor to think with the budget that we have today in terms of how we make fiscally responsible decisions. And the data shows that term limits incentivize legislators to think within that fiscal discipline approach. And especially right now with the budget deficit that we have, that's important. Third, like I mentioned, this is going to a broader conversation this year of charter reform. You kind of, in a bucket year, this is the theme of the year in terms of ballot measures is charter reform. And we're not going to really get this opportunity again where there is a board and a mayor and an electorate that is incentivized to be thinking about charter reform more broadly. And this helps to kind of have that focus on it. So next year wouldn't be possible to do this because right now is the year that we're talking about charter reform as a body and as an electorate.
Excellent. You mentioned budget a couple times as a key piece to this. For those that may not be able to connect the dots as clearly as you, from your perspective, can you elaborate a bit on the budget topic and how this impacts?
Yeah. So basically, when you have county supervisors that are incentivized to think only within the terms that they have to serve, they're going to make decisions on whether to cut certain programs or add programs or grow the budget or reduce the deficit based on how it affects them today. If they know they can keep coming back indefinitely, they might punt the problem down the road and deal with it at a different time. And that's what the data shows. The data shows that when you incentivize legislators to think on a medium-term basis rather than thinking they have an indefinite period of time to solve a problem, and forces them to think about how to solve the problem today with the budget that they have today, because they know they're not going to be here to solve that problem 4 to 8 years from now. depending on whether they're in their first or second term. Versus if they think they can serve indefinitely, they're like, I don't need to solve it today. I can solve it the next time I'm back in office. And that is what helps. And that's the data shows that is that those counties that have term limits actually help to incentivize that behavior, where they are being more fiscally responsible in their budget decisions in that context.
Got it. Appreciate the note there and a bit more on the context behind the budget. There's been a lot of chatter, I think, out in the wild about this proposal not being necessarily healthy for our democracy. Um, what is your message to those that feel this way? And what do you feel those people are not seeing or feeling that may get them to change? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think if the argument is about democracy and American values, it's in our US Constitution, the concept of lifetime term limits for president. That is a constitutional principle. And so, from that framework, I don't think anyone can claim that it is undemocratic or un-American to have lifetime term limits when that is a principle of our Constitution for the highest level of office. And so we're saying that when it applies in our Constitution to the president, it should apply to us and hold ourselves accountable here. Second, in terms of undemocratic, I believe democracy requires change. And I think a lot of San Franciscans believe that as well. Democracy is built as a system of representative democracy to ensure that the values of the people today are reflected in their elected leaders today. And that's more possible when you have a turnover of leadership over some period of time to ensure that as beliefs and values and conditions in the environment change, those positions should be reflected by their elected leaders. And that's more possible when there is term limits to turn that over as well. So I'd say the answer is straightforward, is that democracy requires change, and our Constitution of itself has this element of lifetime term limits in it. So it is a principle of American democracy.
excellent. Um, this question is being asked across the board tonight. Um, and there's a narrative out there that sometimes ballots, when you get to the ballot box, the wording is sometimes complicated or not 110% crystal clear to those that are engaging with the ballot measures in the ballot. What part of the measure have you heard thus far? Do you feel will be most complicated to voters at the ballot box that you might be able to clarify today? I do
Yeah.
recognize that this is a bit more straightforward.
Pretty straight. I mean, what I would say is that the original ballot measure itself was not straightforward, and that's the purpose of this one, is to make it straightforward and clear. The ballot language in and of itself says lifetime term limits. So the whole point of this is actually that we are making it clear, and that the whole point is that the problem you described is what we feel was the problem several decades ago when this measure first came in front of voters, where they probably assumed that they were voting for one thing and not realizing that there was a loophole in there. And so that's why we feel it's important to re-clarify that intent for that exact reason you just mentioned, which is that ballots have been traditionally complicated, and often obfuscating loopholes and exemptions that voters didn't realize would exist. And this is a very straightforward measure. The ballot measure itself, the ordinance was one page literally, and the ballot language is very simple. And I think it's about re-clarifying that intent and solving the problem that you just identified.
Excellent. Couple more minutes here until the next party or the opposition to Measure B participates tonight. Um, there's also been the narrative around, and I don't like pointing fingers. We don't like pointing fingers, but the narrative around this measure has been proposed potentially for the sake of one or two individuals that have held office in the past. Um, what would you say to that?
I'd say two things. I think there's a certain irony in the narratives that are proposed, because the narrative that is being proposed is twofold. They're saying that we're limiting experience in City Hall, and that we are limiting one person's, that this only affects one person. Both those things cannot be true. If only one person is affected by this law, then we are not limiting experience from everyone. So both of those realities cannot be true. What I would say is that this is not intended about one person. This is about holding the current board and the current supervisors and the current mayor accountable. that we are not going to run again. I am not going to run again after 2 terms. My colleagues are not going to run again after the 1 or 2 terms that they have remaining. This affects me and affects the board and affects the mayor. It does not affect other experienced politicians because other experienced politicians have moved on to higher office. And a couple of them have run and lost. And so that is our argument on that, is that this is about holding ourselves accountable. It's not about one person. And frankly, we're not limiting access to experienced politicians because the sample size of the ones that are actually affected is N of 1.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Supervisor Mahmood. That concludes the supporting statement and moderated Q&A for Prop B. I think Ren, his campaign manager, put her contact info in the chat. So please, excuse me, do take that. We do encourage follow-up questions and comments if you feel the need to have your question answered beyond tonight. So thank you so much, Supervisor Mahmood and Ren, and appreciate you investing some time out of your evening tonight.
Sounds good. Yeah, you can feel free to email me or you can email Ren. Ren, their email is in the chat, and then happy to follow up from there. So
Thank you all so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Moving right along here, and I think promptly, we have the opposition to the lifetime term limit Prop B ballot measure. Looks like Richard has joined the room. Richard, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent, Richard. Well, first off, appreciate you joining tonight, and I'll let you take it away with your opening remarks and statement.
Okay. Well, I'm Richard Correa. I see there's a lot of people on here. I'm representing Stop the Lifetime Ban, opposing Proposition B. Parenthetically, I think I'm here because I naturally suspect any policy, I'm suspect of any policy that excludes people from participation in civic life or from access. Prop B is an initiative ordinance placed on the ballot by 5 supervisors, you know their names, all people with great potential for public service. It would amend, oh, you all know the terms of it, but let me point out that it would amend the charter to provide retroactively for 2 terms, lifetime ban limit to 2 terms, and in some cases, a person could be limited to just 6 years as either mayor or a member of the Board of Supervisors. Quite frankly, sometimes something is so rotten of an idea that to describe it succinctly is difficult. I mean, how do you point out rot when there's a lot of it? And so that's why I prepared remarks as opposed to just sort of speaking off the cuff. And I need another maybe minute here. But at a time when there's a $900 million budget shortfall, an affordability crisis, San Francisco is suffering on our streets and dying, and international geopolitical chaos, we're asked to approve a charter change because some are asserting that the older generation is holding back new leadership. Absolute nonsense. Since 1990, when term limits were adopted, over 450 people have run for supervisor. Just twice in 36 years, I went to public school, so I'm not sure I got my math right, but I think it's 36 years, did a candidate run for a 3rd term. And of those 2, only 1 was successful in getting a 3rd term. In 2024, we elected a new mayor, and 4 of the 6 members of the Board of Supervisors had never held that office before, new folks that were elected into office. Term limits seem to be working. Prop B is a solution looking for a problem. Only 2 cities in California have lifetime limits. So imagine if there was a lifetime limit at the state level. Jerry Brown, who served 2 terms as governor of California, and voters reelected him after decades later, later to 2 more terms after significant public service in other capacities, with more experience, with wisdom, and a honed set of skills that the voters desired. Our existing term limits as they are now and have been since 1990, are based on sound public policy grounds. A lifetime ban deprives voters of choice. It's not democracy. It's preemptive disqualification and a disservice to our democracy. Voters are entitled to select the best of the best to represent them. Included in their choice should be experienced public figures whose judgment and skills have grown with time. Notions of good government require rejecting lifetime limits. And I apologize if I feel preachy, but again, this is so nuanced and complicated. But notions of good government require rejecting lifetime limits. Our democracy, I think, as we've seen, operates best when experienced, vetted people of sound judgment serve in government. Without significant public policy grounds, it's unconscionable to limit the public's choices of whom they want to represent them in office, to deny them as a choice individuals whom they have confidence will best exercise the public trust for the common good. I mean, who are we to deprive the 5 supervisors who put this on the ballot of the ability to return one day and serve again, serve with more experience, serve at a time when maybe they're better able and maybe they're wiser? So that's why I'm opposing Proposition B, and I'm hoping that Connected SF will join in that opposition.
Thanks, Richard. I appreciate the statement there. To start off, and you may have touched on this a little bit, but we also asked the supporting team on Measure B the same exact question. Why do you feel this is unhealthy for democracy?
I'm sorry, I say that again. Why is it what?
Why do you and those that are supporting it thus far feel this measure is unhealthy for democracy?
Well, because I think it's the public that has the choice, right? I mean, the public, the basic system of our government is that the people choose and they give their power, their authority, their rights to government operatives to act in their best interest. It's them that has the choice, not us to say what their choices should be. We're very careful about limiting who can run for office in this country and certainly in this state. Term limits are really a different question. I think there are some sound public policy reasons for this, but I think the public is entitled to choose who represents them.
And on top of that, a little bit, I think there's also a narrative out there, especially more recently in San Francisco, past elections, that a lot of people that run for office that are in City Hall today are in it for a job. Do you feel that this sort of narrative and statement would contradict what you're opposing?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of jobs out there. And if you look at our Board of Supervisors, we have some pretty well-skilled people there on the board, right? They make 100, I mean, let me just be practical here. If you're looking for a job, there's a whole lot better jobs than 150K a year before taxes and contributions and such. I, I, call me an idealist, but I think people are really drawn to serve. And if you have that in you, that's fulfilling. Term limits create a churn that allow folks to come and serve and then come back one day and serve again. But I don't think they're looking for a job. I see a lot of talent in our government electeds in this city. I do. So I think to say they're looking for a job would be, I don't know, ignoring a lot of reality about who these people are, their educations, their backgrounds, their vetting. I mean, in some ways, I wonder who would want the job, seeing how complicated and how 24/7 it is. What's funny is I'm not sure. I have a lot of passion about this topic. There might be brighter people than me out there to address your questions, but I do have a lot of passion about it and experience in city government.
You got it. I appreciate that. I think, there was something else that is part of the pitch, so to speak, from the supporting side on this measure regarding there's recently other counties like Shasta County transitioning to this type of model of a lifetime term limit. Um, have you received or, reached out, gone out of your way to identify how this new measure in other counties or cities like Shasta County has felt about since the implementation of the lifetime term limit?
Um, no, and for two reasons. One, there are so few examples of it. And two, I'm of the mind that I don't think it's about churning the pool of public service. I think it's a way that sometimes it's a way to get rid of people. It's a way to get rid of choice. That's the way I see it. So I haven't gone out and researched how Shasta County does it. But let's say you're in a situation where a part of the population is disaffected by a certain ideology. They don't feel represented. You put a lifetime ban in, and you're assuring that people are going to never come back. Uh, I just don't find the good in that. So if you look at is it an icon or an aspect of a conservative voting district or a liberal? I don't know, but I know it's designed to limit the public's choices, and to me that suggests the maybe a longer range view uh, of bringing about change by just through the passage of time, preventing popular public figures from running.
Makes sense.
I mean, listen, in California, who do we say can't run for office? Felons, certain other three or four other categories. It's very limited. So this notion to take um, term limits and build on an appendage to it, saying we'll make it lifetime term limits, strikes me as exclusionary and eliminating choice and taking that choice away from the public. And a whole lot of former supervisors along the ideological spectrum would agree with that statement, have agreed with it already.
Which I think is a good segue and also brought up in the supporting part of the segment for this measure is, there's a lot of speculation, commotion on this measure being brought forth due to a couple individuals that have held office in the past. What's your rebuttal or your answer to that?
Well, I mean, I've often heard if there's an elephant in the room, you might as well introduce it, right? So, is this designed to keep Aaron Peskin out of office? I guess that's the real life example here. Um, I can't imagine that five people would get together and be that frightened of the ideas of a single individual and want to go about making a charter change. That suggests so I keep searching for other good reasons that maybe there's something in there about this lifetime ban that makes sense, but I haven't found any. So it seems that people are defaulting to this is some sort of fear-based thing that Aaron Peskin will run again. John Avalos was the other fellow that ran, and I don't know why he lost or how well he did in that election. But does that address your question? I mean, is it, I mean, how did they come? What's behind this idea? If the other suggestion is that, well, we need to move the old folks along so that the young ones can come along. Well, there's no support whatsoever for that because since 1990, we've had complete churn. There's only been, as I said, two instances of someone coming back. It, I would hope that our the folks that are behind this are more grown up than to be fearful of a single individual.
Appreciate that. And to wrap up here, any closing remarks, statements, things that you may not have mentioned, things that may need a little bit more clarity, you think, from a viewer attendee perspective?
Yeah, just that I think it would be helpful. It's helpful to look at the reasons behind term limits, because to some folks, I think there could be a little confusion about, well, if you have term limits, why don't you have a lifetime limit too? But I'll run through a couple of them. Uh, Term limits prevent entrenchment of power, right? You have somebody, let's say, that can stay in office for 4 or 5 terms, they become more and more powerful. It's designed to eliminate that. Reduces corruption and insider influence. It expands opportunities for civic participation. Term limits do. And really are aligns with democratic principles um, that suggest that power be circulated and not accumulated by a single individual. I think San Francisco has a history and maybe a little aversion to very powerful people, probably pre-1990 when term limits came about, that they were sort of tired of this power structure. Uh, but to have someone leave office for 4 years or longer and come back, like Jerry Brown or like Aaron Peskin, I I think people have the choice. And, I'll end on this note. These that occupy these offices and run for office, they are subject to intense scrutiny. I would say that the passage of time is a real plus in terms of assessing the person's character, their judgment, their wisdom. And the people should have the choice to, after someone's out of office for some period of time, to consider them again. And I don't know. I guess I would also suggest is why do this? Why what's the public policy that's advanced by a lifetime limit to 2 terms? I can't find anything good there.
Well, I appreciate you joining us tonight, Richard. Definitely some insight and perspective there that I think each one of us can take away from tonight. So I do appreciate you joining and closing there strong. And
Thank
if
you.
you want to put your contact information, people may have questions following tonight. Um, we definitely encourage you to do so in the chat.
Okay, I'll do that. And
Awesome.
thank you. Remember, people, it's the people's choice, not Supervisor Mahmood or Wong or any of those others. They should not get to choose who the people get to vote for. People choose. Okay, thanks.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rich.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. We are on track here, and hopefully this has been informative thus far. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. It really does mean a lot to the staff here at Connected SF and Connected SF Institute. You San Franciscans are the reason why our city is so great. So next up, we have Measure C, the exact language, Small Business and Economic Recovery Act. Joined tonight to express supporting statements and engage in the moderated Q&A is Chris Wright from Advance SF. I think Chris has a small presentation as well as part of his supporting statements. And so, Chris, would really appreciate you joining tonight, and we'll let you take it away.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Wright. I'm the Vice President of Advanced SF, and our organization is made up of many of the city's larger employers, and we work closely with many other business organizations. And in this effort around Prop C and D, because there's a interconnectedness that I'll go over, we've been working closely with the Chamber of Commerce. Uh, David from the chamber couldn't make it tonight, and so I'm handling this alone and love to share what we're doing with Proposition C. So let me just pull up our deck real quick. Um, One moment, please. So there are two tax-related measures on the June ballot. One is called Proposition C, which is sponsored by many of the city's public employee unions. And then, I'm sorry, D. And then Proposition C is a measure that is sponsored by Advance SF and the Chamber of Commerce. Just to sort of give a little bit of background, we just went through in 2024, November 2024, a comprehensive tax shift or adjustment here in San Francisco. There were a few things that we needed to address back in November 2024. One is that there were just 5 companies that were responsible for 25% of the city's business tax revenue, and that if any of them left, that would be what they would take with them would be the equivalent of Park and Rec's general fund budgeting. So we needed to address sort of that concern about the stability of our tax system. In addition, our tax system taxes businesses more if they have their employees in San Francisco. And when we were going, after we came out of COVID, we realized that a lot of people were working from home. Many of those homes were outside of San Francisco. And what we needed to do was to shift how we counted our taxes so that we can uh, negate the penalty that employers would have for encouraging their workers to come back to the office. We also tried to provide some small business tax relief in 2024. And it was again, a comprehensive measure. Not everybody was happy. There were winners and losers in this. The city, though, was collecting every dollar that it had collected before, and then some in 20. There are some scheduled tax increases that are happening in 2027 and 2028. Some people paid more, some people paid less, but it was a comprehensive agreement. And what our reaction to this is what we are trying to do with Proposition C is to offer an alternative to what Prop D is, which is essentially breaking of that agreement. We had that agreement that was supposed to last several years, and all of a sudden, within a year of it effectively passing, they started collecting signatures for an additional tax increase. So what does Proposition actually do? Proposition D. Proposition D, again, breaks that tax agreement that we had in 2024. It changes how the Proposition D is a ninefold increase on businesses that are considered to have highly compensated executives. So for this tax, it's effectively a ninefold increase over what the current levels are. It changes how a business calculates their employees. It switches from right now San Francisco employees that's what we currently have. It's based upon San Francisco employees. And what it's going towards is a global workforce, and that will have some impacts to employers. And this new tax will impact employers who don't even have employees in San Francisco. And in total, we think it's going to probably raise about $300 to $400 million, effectively becoming the city's largest tax increase. This is a chart shows the current rates there on the second column, and what Proposition D would do, what the current rates are and what those increases would be. But effectively, it's a 800% increase or a ninefold increase. The formula is an interesting thing. This is a change that it's contemplated in Proposition D. It basically takes, right now, current law has your highest paid executive. It could be a manager. And we know of one business that's being impacted by this. It's a manager that only oversees 2 people, but that person's the highest compensated individual. But it's over your average San Francisco employee base. San Francisco employees generally collect more money than other people in the country or other people in the world, frankly. But that's the ratio currently. The new ratio will take your global employee base. By doing that, everyone's rates will be increased higher. That's how we get to not only the rates are changing, but also how you calculate the rates are changing. So this large tax increase is of concern to the business community because while we recognize that there are some green shoots, we are seeing some new activity for uh, or interest from AI companies, for example. We are seeing some return to office numbers that are positive. But overall, we're concerned that our economic recovery is far from certain. You can see from this chart here that tech employment has dropped significantly over the past several years, and we've never recovered, frankly, the jobs that have been lost in hospitality jobs and other jobs. We are still lower than we were pre-COVID. In addition, we are seeing small business creation out in the neighborhoods everywhere throughout the city uh, at its lowest level that it's been in a long, long time. Um, we also have, frankly, downtown, 30 million square feet of vacant space that needs to be filled. The fact that that space is unfilled is having some significant consequences on the city budget because buildings are being devalued and it's being recorded in the assessor's office, and uh, we're not collecting as much revenue as we did in the past. So what we are offering is an alternative vision for instead of Proposition D, which is a drastic increase on taxes, we're offering Proposition C as an alternative. What that does is it raises the small business exemption level from 5 million to $7.5 million. That number, right now, if you're a small business and your income or your gross receipts are 4 million, you're not paying a gross receipts tax. But if you're making $6 million, you will pay a small business tax. What we want to raise that to $7.5 million, and that number aligns with what was just approved by the Board of Supervisors around the family zoning plan, where we try to support our small businesses who might be caught up in redevelopment out in the neighborhoods. The city said, "Hey, this will provide some support and some protections to those small businesses." As defined by $7.5 million in gross receipts. So we're aligning our business tax code to that level of support that we just approved just last fall. It accelerates the overpaid executive tax or the CEO tax. There's a scheduled increase in 2028. We're moving that forward in 2027. So while this is not revenue neutral, it goes a long way of lessening the impact to the city budget, but at the same time provides some support for small businesses. This is the rates that they would be under Proposition D versus what we're proposing. There is an increase, but it's not as large as an increase under the alternative, which is Proposition D. I'll just say that there's a lot of support in the business community. Sorry, in the public. We've had polling that shows that um, voters are supportive of wanting to retain business in San Francisco. They are supportive of having a positive business climate in the city. And many people believe that the city at 16 billion plus budget, the city doesn't need additional revenue, that it can make do with what it has. So that's our campaign, or that's our proposition, and also Proposition D. Again, we want to protect neighborhood businesses. We believe that, when you're looking at who's impacted by this, by the Proposition D, the labor-backed measure, you're looking at, yes, you are looking at tech companies, but you're also looking at grocery stores, and you're looking at pharmacies out in the neighborhoods that provide services to neighborhoods, and also small business foot traffic that supports other small businesses. Uh, we want to make sure that the economic recovery continues and that it's not um, disrupted by a tax that's not well thought out. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate the statement and the overview presentation. To start, um, how yeah, I think you touched on it a little bit, but maybe continuing on with this subject, how would this hinder and then also help San Francisco's efforts thus far? I think you mentioned early on in your statement around the city recently
Yeah.
restructuring the tax structure for businesses via Prop M in 2024. But yeah, how would this hinder and then also help San Francisco's efforts this far?
So listen, again, the Proposition D, the one that is a ninefold increase to our taxes, I think would be disruptive to our economic recovery. We have been hearing some good news of late. Again, AI, return to office have all been moving in the right direction. Slowly, we are still at, compared to other cities nationwide and globally, our return to office is the lowest. We have a long way to go to bring people downtown. We're missing 100,000 plus people in the downtown corridor alone. What if Proposition D passes? It would be it would show that San Francisco is unpredictable. Here we are with just yet another tax increase on top of probably the highest taxes in the nation, business taxes, certainly in the Bay Area. What the message would be that we're unpredictable, we're unfriendly to investment, and that these business taxes can just come up at any given moment. It would be very disruptive to new companies coming in. It would be disruptive to keeping the businesses that we currently have. Those employees need to, when you're looking at downtown, you're looking at employees that buy lunches, that shop down there. When those people aren't coming back downtown, it has a broader impact on the local economy and smaller employers. There is an ecosystem that is beneficial to small employers, large employers, and also the city's general fund. I think if that new tax happens, there might be a slight uptick in new revenue coming this year to help it alleviate some budget concerns. But I think long term, the budget would be hit harder. What Proposition C offers is another approach that helps smaller businesses. It does bring some additional money with the CO tax and small tax increase, but also helps our small businesses open up by lowering their business tax by lowering their taxes.
Do you have a rough estimate on how hard the city would get hit, the tax base?
So, listen, we don't know. I think there's a couple factors to include. Again, this is a proposition. Proposition C passes our measure, it would be about $30 million. The city would collect $30 million less in taxes. If Proposition D passes, Proposition D will probably collect more revenue in the first year, but it will go down significantly down in the future after that because employers will react. They will reduce their presence here in San Francisco. It could be, it will. We're collecting 1.4 or so billion dollars a year in business taxes. We've been slowly creeping up. In fact, we actually had 200 million more dollars this year than we had in the previous year, which is fantastic. We're moving in the right direction. We'll go back down. Just $200 million after Proposition M was passed in 2024, we'll see that reverse.
Appreciate that clarity a bit more. You mentioned retail stores such as like the Walgreens of the world, the Safeways of the world, maybe the Targets.
Yeah.
They. I think we've all on this call have seen them leave. I think Walgreens alone had 12 stores vacate early 2025 in San Francisco alone. Uh, how much more impact do you think Prop D would have on this sector of business here in San Francisco?
So I live in the Richmond district. We do have a number of sort of these larger mid-size spaces that Walgreens or the CVSs of the world used to have, but don't anymore, or were held by paint store companies or whatever. I think it'll be more difficult for those spaces to be leased out. I think if they're vacant now, they will remain vacant. And I think there's also a greater likelihood that those other stores that are currently there, the Targets and the Walgreens and the CVSs and the Safeways, they look at their cost factors across, many regions across the country, and they evaluate what is, what's worth it, what's not. And if there's a ninefold increase on a certain tax here in San Francisco, that seems to be somewhat targeted against certain employers. I could see them making some business decisions to relocate or to shut down, to shut that location.
Got it. And then following on that question a little bit, and maybe breaking it down a bit more, and it's okay if you don't have the numbers tonight, but
Yeah.
does Advanced SF or the Chamber plan to come out at some point between now and June with more specifics around sort of like the projections around?
Yeah. Yeah, we have an economic study in the works it should be out in the next couple of weeks, we believe, that will go into more detail around the impacts to those retailers in particular. And we'll gladly share that with you. But yeah, those numbers will have some actual data behind it more than me just speaking, and they'll be able to speak to it, that question.
Excellent. And then maybe to close, one more question and then closing remarks
Yeah.
before our next guest, next group presents. Um, on the business, we touched on the retail segment, but the business community, like the Salesforces of the world, I think there was data out there that came from Mayor Lurie that pre-pandemic the tax base was, I think, was it 40 or 60% of the overall uh, revenue for the city. In your conversation with the true business community, those that are either thinking about occupying space or moving to San Francisco, or those that are here in a lease, what's their reaction to your measure, and then vice versa?
What's for the larger employers? What's the reaction?
Yeah.
So again, I think there's a belief amongst many parties, large, medium, and small, that we sat down at the table back in 2024. It took about a year to work out an agreement where everyone was on board. Within the business community, again, there were winners and losers. Some people got some tax reductions, others got significant tax increases. And, it was painful, but they did it because it was the right move for the city to to encourage more return to office, and to provide the city the same amount of funding, actually more funding through the tax increases coming up. It was promised in Proposition M that there would be tax increases in 27 and 28. That we thought we had come to an agreement. London Breed the mayor was involved. The Board of Supervisors president was engaged. Labor was involved and signed off on it. I think the message that everyone's getting is like, why do we even engage here anymore when an agreement's not an agreement? Within less than a year of it passing, no, we'll just do it again. We'll just have another tax increase. So yeah, I think there's just a frustration and concern about Proposition D, and we think we have an alternative, a positive alternative of Proposition C. I did see that there is a question here in the chat, and Mitchell is 100% right. There is a chance that both measures pass, and if that's the case, this state law looks at the different components. And if there are conflicting components, whichever measure gets the most votes, that portion of it prevails. So in that, there is an overlap in both Proposition C and Proposition D around the CEO tax percentages, how high it goes up. Whichever measure gets more votes, that would prevail in that instance.
Appreciate you clarifying. So it's number of votes, it's not percentage.
Sure, it's the number of votes.
Excellent. And to wrap, closing remarks.
Listen, I appreciate your sitting with us talking about tax policy. I know there's a lot of other exciting things to discuss or to talk about here in the city. Um, we're just asking that voters support Proposition C, reject Proposition D, that stay the course. The city is in recovery. It has a bit of a way to go. We have 30 million square feet of vacant office space downtown that needs to be filled. At that rate, by the way, even if it was during the tech boom of the 2010s, it would take 20 years to fill. We at most we were taking about a million half square feet per year in new office space. So we have about 20 years worth of office space that has yet to be filled. Um, our economic recovery, again, what's happening locally is one thing, what's happening nationally and globally is another. I think a significant new tax here in San Francisco, especially the one that is being proposed right now, is so far out of line it will set us on a downward course.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you investing the time tonight to speak with Connected SF Institute and Connected SF members. Encourage you to put your contact info in the chat for follow-up questions from the audience. And have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you. I'm putting my email here in the chat, and thank you all. Have a good night.
Excellent. Well, I see the participant number has stayed the course, so there must be some interesting stuff taking place and being stated tonight thus far. So appreciate you all staying engaged here. A little bit of a shift in programming. I actually got a note about 20 minutes ago from the Prop D campaign, and that they no longer will be able to make it tonight. I did ask a follow-up question: do you have anyone last minute to join? And I have not heard back. So we're very fortunate to have our next, and I should state, in their response to me saying they will no longer be able to make it, they do plan on joining Connected SF Institute's in-person ballot explainer, which we'll share a bit more about at the end of this program. That'll be taking place at the end of April. But next we have, and I should say, the last proposition we'll be speaking about tonight is Proposition A, the Earthquake Safety and Emergency Response Bond. We're going to have Jack Gallagher, the campaign manager for Prop A, start us off here. And I believe, Jack, you're here.
Right here. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I know it's been a long night for you guys, so I'll try to go through this as succinctly as possible. But my name is Jack Gallagher. I'm with Yes on Prop A, San Franciscans for Fire, Earthquake, and Disaster Preparedness. We're the committee supporting the $535 million Earthquake Safety and Emergency Response Bond. This bond is part of a series of successfully voter-approved earthquake bonds in the past that have rebuilt fire stations, rebuilt police stations, helped build new public safety infrastructure across San Francisco. So this is just a continuation of those bonds. I like to say it at the beginning and at the end of every presentation. This is part of San Francisco's 10-year capital plan. The Capital Planning Committee has a longstanding policy to not increase the property tax rate until, or pay off old debt, but before we take on new debt, pay off old debt in order to keep the same property tax rate. So that this bond, like in other previous bonds, will not raise the property tax rate here in San Francisco if it passes. So I like to state that at the beginning as well. But like I said, this is part of a series of bonds. This bond in particular is $535 million. It goes through a number of different programs and projects throughout the city. I think it's best to kind of go through the different categories of projects. The first category is the emergency firefighter water system, which is kind of a broader category for the equipment that the fire department uses in the event of a disaster. For this bond, $130 million would go towards that system, primarily into two projects. One would be an expansion of a high pressure system to the east or to the west side of the city. The east side of the city has already had this system. It was built after the 1906 earthquake, and in previous bond measures, they've spent a lot of money improving and upgrading the old system that actually did fail at certain parts in the 1989 earthquake. So this bond would put money towards that as well as to Fort Mason, so that the system could take on water from the sea. So the fireboat can just plug right into it. So it'd be a pump and the infrastructure for that, as well as it would be $100 million towards to seismically improve fire stations throughout San Francisco. We have a number of them throughout the city that in the event of a disaster, they could be inoperable. There's one example the station number is slipping from my head, but right off of 18th Avenue, that's an old wood frame construction building. So in the event of a major disaster, a building like that critical to the sunset could be deemed inoperable. So we would be spending $100 million towards renovating and seismically improving fire stations, as well as $72 million to make seismic and safety operational improvements to district fire stations and supporting facilities. Within this, Terraville Station could potentially get a major seismic upgrade, as well as the property control division of the San Francisco Police Department. Additionally, there's $33 million for critical building repairs and improvements. In previous ESSER bonds, this went towards other public safety facilities. In the 2020 bond, in particular, to kind of reference the 911 call center, this would be kind of comparable to that. These are kind of critical safety facilities, and these are some of these projects could be larger or smaller. Some of them could be emergency generators to new roofs, but these are kind of a different category of public safety infrastructure that the city has. As well as another component to this bond is $200 million to go towards the Muni Potrero car barn. It is a 110-year-old seismically inefficient building, and funds would go towards fixing that building. That building in particular is critical to the city, not just in the event of a disaster, but the city's recovery. So I think by last number I saw, 95,000 people a day go through the buses that use the Potrero yard. So it is a significant building, and it does have tremendous use in the event of a disaster and in the city's recovery. So I know that's a lot of information to kind of pack into a quick presentation, but we would love to have your support. I know bonds are always kind of a tricky thing for folks, but this is a bond program that the city's had that's been very successful. We've seen fire stations from Station 16 on Greenwich get rebuilt to Station 5 on was that Webster Street get rebuilt. The public safety building out on Mission Bay was part of a previous ESSER bond, as well as the addition of 30 new cisterns that have been installed throughout the city. 15 of those were installed on the west side alone. Those on their own are about 70 to 75,000 gallons of independent water. So these projects have all been, in my opinion, extremely successful and very diverse in the number of projects that they've been able to accomplish through this bond program. So we'd love to have your support. And I know that there's always more questions than there are during the presentation. So I'm happy to answer any.
Excellent. Thanks, Jack. To start, can you elaborate a little bit more on, I think, the specifics around the firefighting threshold or allotment, and then also the police? Is there, as of today, certain line items or specifics that you can give where this revenue generated from this bond would literally be directed to?
So unfortunately, with the way that the bond program is set up and the way the CEQA and state law are set up, they can't be dedicated line items within the bond. So what this would be is a fund that the city knows what projects they want to accomplish and what they know that they can do. It's a matter of they just, due to CEQA law, they just can't say Station 15 is going to get X, Y, and Z, because it needs to go through the approval process for all that. But the city has an idea of what stations they want. They even mentioned it in the bond report that they published at the Board of Supervisors level, stating, I think it's potentially 5 fire stations can get major work done to them. And I'm happy to provide that list and pull that up for you if you're interested. But unfortunately, due to CEQA law, they can't specifically state this, and that. So makes it a little tough, but yeah. But
Got
I will say this though to kind of jump onto it. The bond program does have an oversight program that does do regular reporting. They're actually meeting in 2 weeks in April, and they met previously in February. They produce a quarterly bond report that shows all the projects that they've accomplished, what's in the pipeline, what stage of the pipeline it's in, and I'm happy to provide those. They're pretty comprehensive reports, and they go through the whole timeline of this is in design, this is out for bid, this is under construction. So I'm happy to provide that to show kind of what's been done and what is being done.
Appreciate that. Just very quickly going off track here, you mentioned there's an oversight committee for past bonds. There will be an oversight committee for this bond if it does pass.
Yes.
How do residents, San Franciscans engage with that committee? When is that next meeting?
I'll pull it up for you. So it met last February 9th. They meet in person at City Hall. So it is the Citizens General Obligation Bond Oversight Committee. They have public meetings. Their next meeting is April 13th. And that's when they do quarterly reporting or other reports on the bonds that have been approved by the city. But the next one that I'm looking at the city calendar right now, and it says, yep, Monday, April 13th. So, yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Does the various departments that the money would be allocated to from this bond have any backup plan or alternative plan in the worst case scenario this doesn't pass? And if this doesn't pass, I mean, clearly the what is they're thinking of allocating this money to most likely wouldn't be able to actually get done. Would that prohibit these departments from doing their jobs on a day-to-day basis still?
I would say I can't speak for all the departments, but I know talking with a number of folks within the fire department, if they just won't be able to do them. So it be for a number of projects, it would be deferred maintenance down the road. Without the option of using general obligation bonds, they would probably have to figure out a different way, most likely using their general fund resources in order to pay for those costs. But this is always the general obligation bond program has always been kind of a way to do larger capital projects and kind of free up your general obligation funds. So without that option, they would probably just have to defer a lot of the projects down the road or find alternate ways of funding. But I'd have to I'd have to ask those departments more so. But a number of them would just be deferred down the road.
Got it. On the SFMTA segment of the bond, I think most people see this as a earthquake safety and emergency response bond. And then you mentioned in the chat or in your statement, $200 million will be out of the 535 will be dedicated to the bus yard, the Detroit bus yard. Are you able to elaborate a bit more how this got to be and exactly and more specifically why the SFMTA money, a lot of money, if this does pass, isn't being used instead of from this bond, but from past measures such as Prop L?
For the Prop L question, I'd have to get back to you, and I don't know that answer. But when it comes to this project and everything that I've discussed with folks on it is initially this portion of the bond would have been not a previous, that's a bad choice of word, a future MTA bond. But the critical nature of this facility, this is kind of the best timing for it. By realizing the kind of decay that the building is in and kind of realizing the project scope that they have, that this was the best timing and kind of the best way of funding a project of this size. And I believe Prop L funding would have gone into different avenues, but I can get back to you on that portion of it. But the nature of and the sensitivity of that building in particular is why it was added into this bond, just due to the scope of the infrastructure that it is and kind of its critical connection to the city.
Got it. Appreciate the context there. On the On to the next question. You probably have the insight around past general obligation bonds. I think you mentioned. I think there was three in the past 15 years and change ish, 2010, 2014, and 2020, that had specific criteria outlined that would actually pave the way from those bonds if passed, which I believe all three did, to install the new firefighting water system to cover the west side, or at least part of the west side. Um, how can how can voters feel confident if supporting this measure that would actually get done?
Well, I think one, yes, that the West Side expansion project, I'm not speaking on behalf of the campaign. I'm speaking as a Richmond District resident. Yes, it is slower than I expected it to be. I'll be blunt. I jumped on the 2020 campaign because they were expanding to the West Side. And yes, it's been a little slow, but they're in a massive contract out for contract, I know, in the near future. And I know that that part of the plan is definitely going to be pushing forward. I will say the previous bonds from 2010 and 2014 made massive commitments to the aging and old system that the city had that failed in 89. So the major portions of the old bond were to fix the systems that we already had in place. And the 2020 bond was the first big commitment to expanding to the west side. And I believe they're going to build it. And hell, I'm pushing them as much as everybody else is to do it as a Richmond resident. But I definitely have confidence in doing it. And to be honest, without the partnership of the PUC and the San Francisco Fire Department on this, I don't know if the project would have been able to have been done, period. So without the partnership of the PUC and kind of being able to tap their funding system as well in order to pay for this project is something that is critical to it overall. So I do believe that it will be done and it will impact the Richmond and Sunset neighborhoods when it is complete.
Appreciate that, and glad from my personal standpoint you feel the effects of.
Oh, I grew up in the Richmond district. I grew up on Greenwich and Steiner Street in 1989, and we didn't have power, water, gas for 2 to 3 weeks. So I was really little at that time, and I just remember how scary it was. And I can only imagine what it would be if things are today. But I would love to see all of the city covered with a system like the East Side does. But we need to understand what we can do at the moment that we're at and kind of tackle that issue at the time.
Got it. Two more questions before closing statement, and I excuse me, it's my first time moderating, so backtracking a little bit back to MTA. I'm sure as a San Francisco resident, you've seen a large MTA scale capital projects in the past 5, 10 years. Van Ness, extension of the T, Terraval, West Portal. Majority, if not all these projects, go way beyond their expected due date. And on top of that, well beyond their original planned budget. I know you're not from MTA, but from your point of view in your communications with MTA, is it clear that there's accountability put into this? Will there be clear accountability put into this, and how will MTA, if this does pass, ensure an on-time and on-budget project?
I will say for the Potrero project, from everything I've seen over the years, I think there are more eyes on that project than there are on any other project the MTA's ever done. So I think that has been a community-wide that the entire scope of that yard, not just rebuilding the Muni infrastructure there, but there's been the discussion of housing at that site as well for a very long time. And I know folks have been at many community meetings about it. And I know there have been setbacks on trying to advance the project. But I think now more than ever they've kind of had a big push to kind of get the project across the line. So I could definitely get back to you with more information on it for sure. But when it comes to the scope of their overall projects, I think that there are probably a laundry list of items as to why some of them are longer than others. But I could definitely get back to you on that one.
I think that'd be helpful
Yeah.
for the attendees to get a little bit of clarification on. Um, I think there was one comment that I think would be important as well. And if you have this information live, please do share it. But do you have an idea, rough estimate of what this bond would cost per household or building parcel?
Uh, that I don't, because everyone's tax rate is different. I wouldn't have an answer for that off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Well, that is it from the moderated Q&A portion. I'll let you finish with your closing statement remarks.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to talk and kind of talk to the group. I'm seeing now it's about 55 people. But no, these bonds are really critical to San Francisco. I know everyone gets sticker shock when they see the amount of $535 million. Even I have trouble sometimes saying that number out loud. But I will say there is a long list of successful projects that have come from these bonds. I've seen fire stations get rebuilt. I've seen police stations get rebuilt. I've seen upgraded infrastructure throughout our city. Every time I go to Mission Bay, I see a brand new police, fire, and police headquarters at the end of the facility there. So we've been, I think, extremely successful and smart about the projects that we put forward with the earthquake safety and emergency response bond program. And I think that there are a lot of positives to look for it. And I think by looking at those previous positives, we can look at what we can accomplish with this bond and kind of seeing the impact that we can do across the entire city, both east and west. So we would love to have Connected SF support, and I'm happy to answer any other questions later on, and happy to come to the forum at the end of the month.
Thank you, Jack. Really appreciate you investing some time with us tonight. We do encourage you put your contact information there for follow-up questions from the audience. But yeah, we do look forward to having you join us for our in-person ballot explainer as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks.
Last but not least, to wrap up the evening and this virtual ballot explainer put on by Connected SF Institute and Connected SF, we're thrilled to be joined by the opposing segment of Prop A, Mr. John Crabtree.
We're having a technical issue.
Oh, wait, no, you're
I think we're okay.
you're okay.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Griff, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Griff. Thanks. I'll keep it short. I'd love to get to questions. My name is John Crabtree. I'm the treasurer and principal officer for the Equal Fire Protection for All Committee, which is opposing Proposition A, June 2nd. And, it comes down to just a couple simple reasons, Griff, and everyone on the call. 16 years, 3 bonds passed. This would be the 4th this year. $1.44 billion borrowed and spent. $312 million of that was supposed to be for improvements and expansion of the auxiliary water supply system, emergency firefighting water. 312 million of it was supposed to expand that system. And by the way, Mr. Gallagher's wrong. He said before too that it wasn't until 2020 that we started talking about delivering that to the west side. We've actually talked about that from the very beginning. Each and every bond measure included the expansion of emergency firefighting water language in it, but yet nothing happened. I know there's there's a tremendous desire to say, yes, yes, we haven't been fast enough, but trust us, we're going to get it done this time. The problem with that is history has taught us that that's just not the case. 16 years, three bonds, $1.44 billion borrowed and spent, zero emergency firefighting water hydrants installed in the unprotected neighborhoods in the west side and the southern neighborhoods, running from Seacliff, Richmond, the Sunset, Ingleside, Crocker, Amazon, Excelsior, all the way over to Bayview Heights, and a number in between, some 15 or more unprotected neighborhoods, zero hydrants, 0 miles of pipe. That's been the accomplishment of this bond program. We had spent some time establishing that question, establishing that point, and saying, we shouldn't approve another bond. We should reset the program because its performance has been so poor in this regard. But then the proponent's ballot argument came out earlier this month. And in that, the proponent, who was the mayor and several other people signed under him, he said that this bond would deliver emergency firefighting water supply to, quote, the west side and every neighborhood in every corner of the city. That's the standard that's been set. It simply demonstrates that once again, City Hall intends to pull the wool over our eyes, take another bond for $535 million, go off and build projects and facilities in other places, and not the west side and not the southern neighborhoods, and not the places that are unprotected. It has been too long and too dramatic. That's why we believe this program needs a reset, a no vote on A, and then we need to get to work on building a bond program that actually delivers equal fire protection to the entire city.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate the opening statements there. To start, and similar questions from we asked from the supporting side. Is there some sort of alternative plan, alternative scenario if this thing doesn't pass, that you've been able to identify to at least some extent on that would be able to cover these projects within the current proposal?
Yeah, so there's been throughout the history of the Easter bond program, there's been a conversation about potential plans, different types of plans, but there's been one undergirding plan, which is an expansion of the existing auxiliary water supply system. This is something that the civil grand jury in its report in 2019, it was actually a civil grand jury seated in 2018, report came out in 2019. That civil grand jury said that for at that time you could expand the AWS as the existing, the fire protection exists in about 40% of the city, expand it to the other 60% for maybe $1 billion, but definitely do it within a year. Or a year. I'm so sorry. Within a decade, within 10 years, and definitely be able to do that. But also, they were making the point that this is something that has to happen. One of the things about talking about delays is it doesn't acknowledge that the clock is ticking on this. Every resident of San Francisco knows that there's a massive earthquake coming. Nobody knows exactly when it's going to be, but we know that every day that goes by, we're one day closer to the big one. And 16 years, that's 5,844 days going by, getting one day closer to the big one. So what we should do, Griff, is take that plan that's been on the books and been advocated for by people like Frank Blackburn and others for decades to expand the saltwater AWSS system to the full city, move that quickly, and do it within the time frame that the civil grand jury identified 6 years ago, which was that it could be done within a decade. That's the plan. That's the plan that exists. That's the plan that should be the alternative, and that's what should be delivered. And if we can actually reset this program, if we can pull back from all the things that we've spent money on that were made priorities over delivering emergency firefighting water and actually focus on that, we could get that done in that time frame, and we could make it work in the context of this bond, the size of this bond. But we're going to have to bring that alternative. It's got to be a saltwater system. It's got to be an expansion of the AWSS, and it needs to be done urgently.
Thanks for that context, John. Moving on to the SFMTA segment, have you personally gained any insight regarding why roughly 40%, I think it's 37.5% to be exact, of the overall $535 million is going to the Prochero bus yard? Why SFMTA isn't using Prop L funds, for example, Prop L 2022, which was a half-cent sales tax to fund transportation, passed by voters. Do you have any insight as to why this is being put into an earthquake emergency service fund?
I don't know that I would call it insight, right? Because that would mean that someone told me or confirmed something for me. This is something that the city, whenever you talk about why are we throwing $200 million, almost 40% of this bond to the Muni bus facility at Potrero, it's really important. It's important to evacuate people. That was one of the first things. It's first important to get first responders there. That was the second thing. Then it was something else. And then it was about recovery, and we need to have a bus system. Because I guess if we're sitting out here in the sunset with all of our houses collapsed and burned around us, at least we'll be able to hop on a Muni. I mean, I guess that's the kind of thinking. But the reason is Easter is a highly saleable product. The people have voted for the earthquake safety and emergency response bond every year to the tune of some 74% one year to a high of almost 82%. That's the reason why you move the transit bond under Easter, is because it's saleable. It's a hot commodity. It has historic popularity, and you assume maybe a chunk of a muni bailout is not going to be quite so popular on the ballot issue, especially since in 2022 the last transit bond was defeated. The speculation, the insight is that they don't want that to happen again. Does Muni need money? Yeah, sure it does. But I don't think it needs to displace priorities like, I don't know, building emergency firefighting water systems in the unprotected neighborhoods. I don't think that's appropriate. The insight is the reason you do it is because the bond is a popular bond, and Muni and Transit and $200 million for it is not quite as popular on the ballot.
Popularity.
Yeah, and it sounds cynical, and I don't mean to be. And honestly, I'm not saying Muni doesn't need money, but so does earthquake safety, right? And this is so much about let not. This is not just about what things cost. This is about what we call priorities. It's about how we prioritize the things that we want to do to make people safe, to make life better in San Francisco.
This is a little bit more of a feel question, but I'm curious your take. Uh, Two of the five line items or sort of allotments from this bond go to firefighting facilities and infrastructure, along with police infrastructure. and facilities. Uh, I think most Connected SF Institute Connected SF members more or less are supportive beyond the mayor's efforts and backing these agencies that are really critical to San Francisco's recovery. What would you say to those on the call why you would oppose these, despite sort of the narrative and the feeling of sort of where we're headed with these agencies as a city?
I think those priorities need the same exact reset for this bond program as emergency firefighting water does. Ask yourself a question. It was mentioned before about the public safety building in Mission Bay. That was the number one priority in the 2010 bond. $243 million out of a $400 million bond went into that facility. Okay, that's fine. The chief's got to have a place, and we need a big public safety building for administration and the leadership of the fire department, police department. Fine, fine. All right, but that was the priority. What were we doing with neighborhood fire stations and neighborhood police stations while we were building that? Nothing. That's the answer. And especially when you look at these bonds year after year, or 4 years after 4 years after 4 years, when you look at them over time, the same areas that have been neglected when it comes to emergency firefighting water have been neglected when it comes to fixing up neighborhood fire stations, neighborhood police stations. When you build out what all these bonds have been spent on, the unprotected neighborhoods, and when I say that, I mean unprotected for emergency firefighting water, but those same neighborhoods have also been neglected when it comes to their fire stations, their police stations. I would suggest anybody that supports any of these priorities, and by the way, we do. That's why we called this committee Equal Fire Protection for All Committee, because what do you need to fight fires, especially post-earthquake firestorms? You need firefighters and you need water. And those two things have not been protected in the western neighborhoods and the southern neighborhoods, those 15 unprotected neighborhoods. Those are the two things we just haven't seemed to be able to get to and prioritize. That's why this bond needs a reset. It's not just about fire hydrants, it's about actual prioritization of the infrastructure, the human, the firefighter, the police, and the emergency firefighting water. It's about bringing all of those things to those unprotected neighborhoods. We have not been a priority in 3 bonds and $1.4 billion. We're not going to be a priority in the next one either unless we vote no on this and reset this bond program.
Excellent. Thanks, John. And to wrap, closing remarks. I know we're coming up on time here, so closing remarks.
Um, Keep it super simple. The mayor came out in the proponents' ballot argument and said this bond's going to deliver emergency firefighting water to, quote, the west side and every neighborhood in every corner of San Francisco. That's a direct quote. You can go look it up if you want. It's online at the DOE. I believe that should be the standard, but there's no way ever that this bond delivers that. I believe that should be our goal, to deliver that to every neighborhood in every corner of the city. But there's no way this bond can do that. At $130 million, they won't have the money to build a pipe from Lake Merced to Golden Gate Park, let alone into the Richmond, let alone Bayview Heights, the Excelsior, Crocker Amazon, Merced Manor, Ingleside, Seacliff, all these other unprotected neighborhoods. They will never get to those with the allocation that's in this bond. So plain and simple, I believe the mayor set the right standard, but they've written a bond that cannot possibly accomplish it. And that is a deception of the first order. This bond needs to be voted down, reset, and let's build a program that can actually save people when the big one comes.
Thank you, John. appreciate you investing some time with Connected SF Institute and Connected SF members. This wraps up our virtual ballot explainer. Um, Before I hand it off to Ave for closing remarks and we shut down here tonight, I know I've said this before throughout the evening, but thank you all for joining. You San Franciscans are the reason why San Francisco is the city it is today, a city that's well on its way to recovery. This session, this virtual ballot explainer, will be posted on our website, the CSFI website, as it has been recorded. My mistake. I pressed record a couple minutes into the session, but it will be posted on our website. Lastly, and I think Avi will get to this, but we do have an in-person explainer coming down the pipe at the end of April. If you've felt this session was informative in any bit, which we hope you're walking away with some sort of knowledge and confidence headed to the ballot box with this information come June, please share and spread the word. This is a movement, and the bigger the movement and the more people informed in San Francisco, the better for our city. Thank you very much, and off to Ave.
Thank you, Griff. And thank you all very much for spending time with us this evening. And a special thanks to all the speakers for preparing such detailed information for us to absorb. You know, we've covered a lot of significant information tonight, presenting both supporting and opposing perspectives, so you can make informed voting decisions. As an organization, Connected SF Institute and Connected SF conducts ongoing research and engages deeply with the issues and the candidates that impact our communities. In the coming weeks, we will share our perspectives through our comprehensive voter guide. And we will, that comes through thoughtful analysis and commitment to the transparency that we have. So you can not only see all sides, but understand where we stand as an organization. So we also invite you to continue the conversation with us at our in-person event that we've mentioned a couple times. It will be a ballot explainer again, but in person on April 29th at 7 p.m. at the San Francisco County Fair Building, where we'll go even deeper into the issues and release our official voter guide then. So again, thank you very much for your time and your engagement. And most importantly, thank you very much for being an informed voter. Have a good evening, and thank you again.